Hello. What did you learn to fear? I have spoken to a few people in the last couple of days because I tend to speak to people every single day, which is really good. I get to sort of wind my coaching in amongst the other work that I do. And I've been speaking to clients this week about what they've learned to fear. So I want to know what you've learned to fear. Because a lot of people don't know where their fear comes from. And it's really interesting because I believe we learn because of the experiences that we've had. Many moons ago, about 10, maybe 12 years ago now, I was a swimming teacher for a couple of years. And I used to teach everything from 3-month-old babies right up to fully grown adults. And one thing I noticed that was really interesting was the level of fear, because babies aren't born afraid of water, they're not born racist, they're not born sexist, they're not born anything really, they're just born innocent, and they learn fear, they learn hate, they learn prejudice. So what I found really interesting, in the second year that I was there was a school in Sydney of a particular ethnicity that was doing a girls program, getting year 8 to 10 girls swimming and comfortable and familiar with the water. So these girls rocked up on a bus. There was probably 60 of them, and I was in charge of coordinating their 6-week Learn to Swim program. So, teenagers, like some of them were bigger than me, but absolutely terrified of the water and terrified of getting in the water because culturally, learning to swim was not that important, and there appeared to be quite a bit of fear around it. So when they were standing sort of waist deep, they were all, giggling and carrying on. But even putting their face in the water or under the water was amazing. Like some of the girls started to cry. And by the end of the 6-week program, they were diving in the deep end. And, some of them were amazing swimmers. They really surprised themselves, and others, doggy paddled down the other end. But at least I got everybody in and we got rid of their fear. The way that we got rid of their fear was by progressively doing different games and things that showed them that the fear that they felt wasn't real. And I spoke to a couple of the teachers because I was really interested, because right across the board, over 90% of the girls were really, really genuinely frightened of the water. And they just said, culturally, these girls would have, washed their hair in the shower and not even really necessarily had baths. The hygiene was perfect. Let's put that out there. But swimming was instilled in them that they just didn't swim and it was dangerous. So they learnt to be afraid of the water. That's what I'm saying. So you remember I use the phrase a lot, you learn what you live. So you can learn fear as a child. If you're growing up with a parent who's very broody and quiet, as a kid, you could make that mean anything. And it could go one of many ways. You could have a child who becomes, they learn to fear silence. So they'll either become withdrawn around someone who is quiet, like their parent was, because the uncertainty, or they might, become very chatty and be incredibly uncomfortable with silence. So, you might have an adult that just cannot have, a few moments of silence. They've got to speak, even if they're fumbling over their words and saying, silly things that embarrass them. They just learn to be really afraid of silence. Like I have a client that I spoke to this week, and he grew up with parents who fought all the time. And he is just hopeless at confrontation. So he said, because when I was saying to him, what have you learned to be afraid of? And he said, it's easy, confrontation. He said, I grew up with parents who would just constantly bicker and fight. And I just learned that, I learned to be afraid of confrontation. He said, I hate it. I never stand up for myself. I don't speak up for myself because I'm afraid that it's just going to blow up, and I go back to that time, and we did timeline on that and got rid of it. But he was really fascinated about, and he was able to relate it to a lot of other things in his life. I've got another guy whose dad was a road rager, like a serious road rager. So this guy's a really nervous driver because he's learned to be afraid of the traffic, because he said that's the only time his dad would go off was in the traffic. And, he said, I failed my P's twice because I was like nervous in the traffic. I was waiting for the driving instructor to yell at me. I was waiting for the training guy, that was doing my test to yell at me. And he said I was nervous when my first girlfriend got in the car with me. So this guy's just, can you see how you take on that limiting belief that, as a kid, if your dad's a road rager or your mum's a road rager, that's the only time you associate with the trauma. So it's stressful in traffic. And, so the girls learned to be afraid of water. My clients learned to be afraid of silence and to be afraid of expressing themselves. So I have another guy who's afraid of success. He's very capable of success. Actually, I've got a couple of ladies too who are the same. And they had parents who were critical, quite possibly from a good place. I know one of them was not from a good place. His dad would put him down because his dad obviously didn't have very good feelings about himself, and he saw his son being successful. So unfortunately, he put his son down a lot. And the three females that had very similar parents who put them down. But, we as parents, we want our kids to do really well. And sometimes the way that we word our encouragement comes across as, because all the kids are going to hear is, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. And that's what they decide, regardless of your intent as a parent. So these four in particular, I noticed, are afraid of success because they don't want to be too successful. Otherwise, they'll be afraid that they'll get criticized by their parents. Like, it's amazing what we learn and what we make circumstances mean. So what I want you to do is think about some of the things that you believe, and think about some of the things that trigger you, and the things that and I want you to write in the comments or maybe PM me and just tell me what you've learned to be afraid of. Because it fascinates me. It fascinates me. And then when we have a conversation about it, and because there's what you think it is and there's the truth. And sometimes you can't get to the bottom of that without a few strategic questions to blow out your boundaries on that one. So thank you for joining in. I will see you tomorrow night. And yeah, do drop me a line and let me know what you're afraid of and if you think it's real or not. Okay, bye.